All right. Welcome back to the Ownership Podcast. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Dana Guandolo, who is the Director of Enterprise Partnerships at EV Passport. Dana, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Yeah, I'm super excited to chat with you and share just general information on EV. It's really a different world, so excited to jump in with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Like I was saying, I have an EV myself. I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. So I'm excited to jump into this. So before we jump into the company and hear about what you guys are working on, can you give our listeners a little bit of a background on yourself and what brought you into this space?
Sure. I started out years and years ago as a loan officer for a large bank. And as you may remember, some of your listeners may remember, 2008 was a very tough year for the mortgage business in general. And so I pivoted at that point and moved over to multifamily specifically. And that's how I got into that specific vertical that I'm now in. So just kind of fast forward, multifamily has been the business vertical that I've been in since 2008, beginning of 2009. I've done a lot of different things within that. I've worked for large companies, different advertising agencies as well. And then I've also worked recently for a company that's in the fraud detection space. And they were a startup, and that's part of the reason that brought me to EV Passport. But it was the one of the most fun startups that I'd ever been a part of, really blessed to be a part of. When I started working for that particular company, it was a very small company. We had 250, just under $2 million a year in revenue. And by the time I left, after about 3.5, almost 4 years with that company, we had grown to almost a $30 million business. And I had never been a part of a startup. I'd worked, like I mentioned, for large banking. It's always been the corporate kind of world. And, that was fine. But once I got that experience with a startup that was a successful startup, I really understood how to look for products that are either that see a need, fill a need niche, or if it's something to where I see that there's not a lot of folks that are in that space to be able to provide the value for that. And at the time when this particular company that I worked for started up, there was nothing to help apartment ownership groups and management companies to detect or determine whether or not a pay stub was real or fake. They just accepted it, looked at it, and as we all know, AI has really changed the gamut on things, and you can create anything these days. And there wasn't anything in that space, so I knew the potential for that startup to really explode was there. And just joining that organization and then moving now over to EV Passport, this company was started in 2020, and I see the potential for the growth, not just in the organization itself, but also within the EV sector. You just mentioned that you are an EV driver. We have seen exponential growth year over year, different markets for different things for EVs. So between the potential growth, and I see that for where we're going from infrastructure, the industry, not just in multifamily, but in commercial, retail business, mixed use business, all of those different verticals that are there, there is an absolute need that is continuing to grow and will continue to grow for electrical vehicle charging stations. So that is what brought me to EV Passport.
No, it sounds like you got right in front of the wave, right? I mean, from here, as we look at, for example, like EV sales numbers and data like that, you
Mhm.
guys you're like right at the perfect place, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Uh, so that's awesome. I'm excited for you guys. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
EV
go ahead.
has really evolved over time, Ryan. We had, and that's the other thing that brought me to EV Passport. There have been over the last several years a lot of different government incentives, rebate programs that have sunsetted in Q4 of 2025. And a lot of the companies who were once doing business in the EV space, a year or so ago, those companies don't have the funding behind them. The company that I work for now, EV Passport, we have a very large industrial firm that does provide the capital for us. So we have the ability to remain in the space and continue to grow in the space where other larger companies or even smaller companies, the model hasn't shifted.
Yep.
The model when we first started with EV vehicles, a decade or so more ago was, and I'll speak just again to the multifamily because that's where my industry experience is "Oh my goodness, we have these apartments and now we have EV drivers. We gotta put these things in the ground." So there wasn't a strategy around how many should we have, how many vehicles are in our community that are using EV or that drive an EV. If we have 4 chargers, are all 4 chargers being utilized, or should we have only put in 2? There was no strategy around that, and as we've evolved just from, from a country nationwide, we have seen that there's more of a strategy in place. Who was your partner? A lot of companies out there, they don't have a revenue share, that they offer to their clients. We do. We have a revenue share. So that ancillary income is kind of a hot button word in the multifamily industry specifically, where ownerships are looking, especially as we move through 2026 into 2027, looking for that ancillary income. It's been a rough couple of years in the multifamily industry for developers and ownership groups, a lot of refis that have come through, high rates, that kind of thing. So, a partner that can really almost do a large scale deployment through their at their properties or throughout their portfolios, in addition to having that revenue share. And that's something that we offer that's not like anything else in the industry. So again, that just goes back to the shift in strategy for companies, the shift in mindset for where we were a decade ago versus where we are now in 2026.
That's so good. So I want to unpack that because I was again reviewing your website and I saw that and I absolutely want to talk and again just kind of unpack what you said. So can you, to my understanding, you guys have the capital groups in place to actually. So if you go to, for example, an apartment complex, multifamily unit complex, how does the conversation go, and how can you guys do this? Can you just explain the zero upfront cost, the revenue share on the back end, really just the whole model that you guys actually bring to the table?
Well, we have 2 models. So the traditional model, if you will, is where I know I need chargers and I need somebody to install them. So I have to write a
Yeah.
check for the tenant improvement. And if it's a tenant improvement, if it's a new development, same concept. But
Okay.
the tenant improvement is where all of my infrastructure is in place, but now I've got to come in and make that property or upfit that property to so I can put in the infrastructure for the EV charging stations. So most oftentimes those are costly for the investors or for the asset ownership groups. It's anywhere from 30 to upwards of $100,000 to dig through the concrete. How much conduit do we need? Do we need to add another electrical power? Like all of these different things that come into play when it is a capital expense, so it's just directly out of their pocket. So that's what we typically see, it's the CapEx model. The other option that we're able to offer, because we have those long-term investors with the capital behind us, is it's almost like a subscription model, basically.
Mhm.
We refer to it internally as the IaaS model, or infrastructure as a service, and it's where instead of paying that capital up front, that 40, 50, $60,000, we're kinda like the EV bank. We
Mhm.
will fund that, and then we will have or the properties then in turn will have a subscription monthly to that. And listen, different models work different ways for different asset ownerships. Some asset owners are, "Hey, I this is a new development. I've already got the capital built in for
Mhm.
the EV charging stations. I just need you to come in and bolt them down and manage them." Because that's the other part that's really has been a challenge over the last several years that we are also doing as part of our program is it's not just about putting them in. It is the software update. It's what if somebody backs into it with their car and there's damage that's there. So all of the management, no matter which model you go with for our company, if it's the IaaS infrastructure as a service subscription model basically, or if it's capital, we will manage both of those. So any resident questions, property team questions, anything like that, we take care of for our clients. We really want it to be just an additional because it is an additional amenity for their residents. Not this, oh my gosh, here's somebody else walking in my office with a complaint about the one that's broken or it's not working or the hose doesn't contract or whatever that challenge is. So we want to make it as seamless as possible to have that as a true amenity for the residents.
Absolutely. And I think from the standpoint of an amenity that they can offer, right, it makes that property more attractive because of the EV wave and where things are going. Me being in the solar space, I have these conversations all the time with
Mhm.
people on the difference between the cost for gasoline versus the cost of electricity and then the cost of electricity with solar. And the numbers are it's not even close, right? I mean, it's phenomenal from the standpoint of
Yeah.
the cost
Yeah.
being cost effective.
Really good point too that I just want to touch on because there are people, developers, ownership groups out there that have not previously charged the resident for the power. So
Mhm,
it's just let's just put this here and we just offer it. And what happens is the assets end up paying for those utility bills. And
mhm.
let's just think the last time I pulled because I'm still driving a car that is not EV yet. I know you have one that's on my
Yeah.
next to-do list, but
Yeah.
I I don't get to pull up to the gas station and get gas for free. So it's no different with power. So I make that point because that is also an evolving thought process of, well, I don't want to upset my residents. We've never charged for it before. And having that conversation and knowing that, that is perfectly industry standard now. Residents expect, and they honestly are willing to pay. We typically see they're willing to pay up to $25 a month just to
Mhm.
secure their own spot to charge their car. To
Which is so cheap compared to comparatively speaking to just the cost of electricity, right? So,
exactly.
that's crazy.
Yeah, so, just that shift again in mentality of it's okay to have the stations that are charging back to or the resident pays for them directly. They're not paying through the property. This isn't anything like that. This is they pull up just like I pull up to get gas, they would pull up to their charging station and they pay for power, but to your point, it's so much more affordable than it would be from a gas perspective. Yes.
Absolutely. So, on the 2 different models, right, conventional or traditional where there's the capital up front, right, there's the ownership of the whole product, everything else. What's the return on investment? What's the break even point typically that you guys see on model number 1?
So that depends on the metro. So what we typically see is if it's about 12% utilization, so that's about 4 hours per day per charger, that's going to be in that sweet spot. Most chargers are going to be used 4 hours per day because it takes about 4 hours to charge your vehicle up. And as you probably know, anytime you pull up to an EV charging station, it's not that same mentality of, I got to fill up my tank,
Right.
right? You top off, kind of like we do our cell phones. We know that electrical vehicles slash even our cell phones, they don't really need, nor want, nor should they be charged to 100% every time you pull in. It's
Mhm,
not good for the longevity of the battery. So typical return also depends on the market. So for example, we have properties in Florida. Florida has a highly adopted EV station or EV state as is, of course, California. It seems like and if it's happening in California, it's gonna migrate over to the
mhm,
east of the country anyway. But, DC is a very highly adopted market as well. So in those particular markets, we see more than 40 cents per kilowatt hour that is being charged back to the resident. So, and that's something that we do internally, Ryan, as well for our clients. So, once they've decided to choose to work with our company, we've installed those stations at their property. We work with that on-site team or if it's senior leadership or ownership group to establish what should your price point be in that
mhm,
market because it's not going to look the same and I live in North Carolina, Charlotte. So it's not gonna be the same in Sanford, North Carolina, as it would be in Raleigh, Durham, or in Charlotte. So we work as our client or our customer success team, they work with our clients very closely to make recommendations always up to the client on what they wanna do, because at the end of the day, you don't wanna price gouge your residents, right? You wanna have it to where they're using your stations and they're not going 3 doors down to the next station and using those. The point of it is an additional ancillary revenue as amenity that they can utilize that's there on their property. So
mhm.
we work very closely with our clients to make sure that they do have that and the price set right for the residents.
That makes sense. So if it's and hopefully I know obviously in California, we're like the most expensive utility state in the nation from the standpoint of electricity. But I could see elsewhere, right? If people are charged at 20 cents, 25 cents, whatever the average cost per kilowatt hour is, and then someone, the owner wants to add a 3, 4, 5 cent adder on as a convenience fee, right? It just pencils so well. That's awesome.
Yeah, it does, and, you also have to think about What if it's a mixed use property? Or what if your property, it's a gated community, but the chargers are just outside of the community? That's where their
Mhm.
location is. You can have that opened up as a public, so you can have it can be identifiable. Plug Share, I don't know if that's one of the apps that you use to identify plugs when you're traveling, but that app, as an example, you can see all of the different ones that are public. If you don't want it public, you can have it set to private, so it's only there for use of your residents. There's a lot of different ways, to your point, to pencil in that additional revenue. But let me just state this. No one is getting rich from EV charging stations, okay? Point of it is an amenity for the residents is the first thing. And the second thing is to offset that power bill for the ancillary income. These days when folks are looking for apartment communities, a few years ago, it was ILS or internet listing services. Some of your larger companies, the CoStar, apartments.com, you would go to those, type in your requirements or what you're looking for. I want to bring my dog and I want an EV car. Those were the apartments that would pull up in your specified area. Many
Mhm.
people these days are using AI to have their searches. So they're going to ChatGPT and they'll type in, I want to live in this particular zip code. I want to bring my dog. I need 2 bedrooms and I got to have an EV charger. And if you don't have an EV charging station, but the property down the street does, they even visit your property, even if they love every other amenity that you have. No one's searching necessarily by, if they don't have a grilling station, I can't go there. Not saying that's not an important amenity, but my car and my dog or my cat, those are like, I got to have those things, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. And then on the secondary model, I'm assuming, right? So if it's the zero down option, you guys cover the costs. You guys are in it for the long haul to break even and then make money. I was going to say, do the investors in that model, are you guys as the investors still you're making money over, it's subscription based, right? So you have a subscription cost, and then I'm assuming the owner of the property themselves, they can still build in like their margin, which is their profit share above and
That's correct.
beyond, like, the retail cost of power.
That's correct. They do that as well. And the revenue share is the big one of the larger parts of it, but the other piece to that is oftentimes when you have the either the tenant improvement or let's just say it is new development, just trying to coordinate all of the things that you need, be it permitting, be it the electrician, managing just general contractors as a whole is really overwhelming for not just a property team, but even if they're doing it themselves for their construction teams and things like that. Both of our models, we plan for all of those things. We have an entire deployment team. We work with thousands of installers across the country. So once they sign the agreement with us and they choose to partner with us, we take care of all the rest. No matter which model it is, it's always more cost effective if it is new development for the owner or the development team
Yeah, that makes
run
sense.
their power and the conduit and all the things, and we just come in and bolt it down. But the other thing I want to be sure to mention on both of our models is that we do the heavy lifting within EV Passport as our deployment team that we have. We've got great experience from several different large companies. I won't mention any specifically on here, but we have some great expertise that work on our deployment team, managing that team, relationships with our installers across the country. And that's just an extra added one less thing on a property management company or an ownership's plate if they really do need those tenant improvements to add the EVs there.
So good. I wanna switch gears and ask you a little bit about some, like, operational challenges, if any. So, I mean, do you see challenges, whether it's customer acquisition, support, the scaling infrastructure, internal coordinations between teams? It sounds like you guys are pretty buttoned up, but you guys have any operational challenges as of right now?
So I'll tell you, it's when you are a part of a startup. So again, we were founded in 2020.
Mhm.
There's always gonna be a quick pivot and a learning. We have an enterprise team now, but when we first started the company, we didn't have an enterprise team, and the whole purpose of an enterprise team is if I'm just giving an example, if an ownership group has 50 properties and 30 of those 50, they need the tenant improvement, we can uplift all 30 of those at one time. So we can
Wow.
go with the coordinating of all of those projects at one time. Now we'll, space that out based on the needs of the ownership group. So maybe they need some in April, maybe they need some in June. But all of those things, it's the whole it's like that blue chip process, right?
Mhm.
Being able to, at a grand scale, offer those things for the client so that they can do that. That's something that has evolved over time with us. That's not something that we started out doing. So I'm sure in the beginning that was a lot of different challenges, presented a lot. As far as operational challenges, we don't really have any. Marketing is something we're really focused on in 2026. We have not, because we've been in a startup position, had the luxury of, being all the brands and all the things that a lot of folks in our space right now do recognize. So we really have put a big focus in 2026 on marketing. We've got a really strong marketing team. Our LinkedIn page has really gained some traction as well, and we're starting to really focus on putting some content out there so that folks not only know who we are as a brand, but what we offer for or for our different models, but then just to be able to see our jobs. When we've installed a job, what does that look like? What do our units look like? I mean, we don't ever get in. I don't usually need to get into the weeds specifically on what the specifications are, but everybody loves to see a LinkedIn completed photo of a great looking project, no matter what it is, commercial, industrial, residential, all of that content does well on LinkedIn. And those are the kind of things where those personal touches with our clients and what we're focusing on for 2026 from a brand recognition perspective will be really important for us this year as we scale.
That's awesome. And like you said, the enterprise model or just the infrastructure of contractors, right? That network, I would imagine that would take some time to build so that
Yep.
you guys could actually service pretty much any area across the United
Yeah.
States.
We do. We service all throughout the country. And certainly we have some more installer partners than others. There's a lot of installers that we have on the East Coast that they'll cover a bunch of different cities. So
Mhm.
there's a couple that we work with in North Carolina that I'm familiar with. And, they'll service properties for us in Georgia or in Florida. And then, so there's a bunch of different places to stretch, right? So it's not just one installer, it's lots of different installers covering a lot of different markets.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so important. Obviously, if you guys were only in one market specific, you wouldn't be able to scale like you guys have.
That's right. And, we predominantly start because we're based out of California, just outside of LA. So a lot of our business initially was in California. And I always say, I know you live in California, but if you can do business in California, you can do business anywhere because and
That's
I
so
say
true.
that from an infrastructure perspective because California is a very green state. They There's a lot of different municipalities there that they work in their own sort of way. And we have some of those same things in other metros, but for infrastructure and being able to really succeed in California, which we have casinos, we have hotels, of course, we have multifamily. That's almost like the box check of, okay, let's roll this out nationally. So we've been able to scale, starting predominantly on the West Coast because that's where we were based and now here across the country.
I'm laughing at what you said because to build anything in California, there's so much red tape that I feel like a lot of companies would just quit and run and jump states, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
it's
and it's
crazy.
really a lot of navigation, Here's an example, California requires, and I'm not gonna speak 100% accurate, I'm just gonna tell you the summary of it, but there's something specific, I don't know if it's a certification or something that's needed within California, and only California requires this, but it's something to where if you don't have it done, you will receive like a ten to $1,000 fine for
Mhm.
your every single charger you have if you don't have the certification. So
Yep.
if you're an ownership group and you're not aware of that particular law that's gone into effect, I think it was either last year or the year before, then you are at risk of getting a fine. Versus if we're managing all of your charging stations, we know that that exists. We know that that certification has to happen. And we want to make sure that it happens because remember, we're the ones who own those stations and we manage them. And we want to make sure revenue is being generated for our clients. So, just as an example, being able to not just do business, but it's bigger than that because laws are constantly changing. Recently, as of January 1st this year, Atlanta, the metro of Atlanta, Georgia, they now have any major tenant improvements that you have, any major new developments that you have in the pipeline, they now specify that you have to have a certain amount of your parking spaces dedicated to be charged. They have
Awesome.
So even if it's not something you deploy, you've got to plan for it in a new development. So those types of laws we are always on top of that a lot of times, folks may not be, and it's just because they're changing so quickly.
Yeah, they're focused on the day to day versus, double checking obviously the intricacies.
Right.
Oh, that's great. And that's the same argument, right? When someone buys a multifamily property and they're like, "Well, I'm just gonna self-manage this." And they've
Yeah.
never managed a property before. You're gonna trip and fall flat on their face versus having a management company and it's very passive. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think it is really important. I've been in multifamily since, like I said, 2009, and I have a lot of long-standing, long-term relationships. And EV Passport comes from a consulting perspective. I mentioned earlier, it depends on which model might work best for you. Maybe it's the capital up front. Maybe it's, I don't want the capital up front. I just want the subscription model. But it's more of an open conversation and being able to ask the right questions and provide information. So at the end of the day, the client feels empowered to know how many chargers they're going to need and to know where the best place is from a cost effective perspective, where to put it on that property. Really, that's the other thing that I also really appreciate about EV Passport, because if I don't know the answer, I can guarantee you I can figure it out between our network of folks that we have in house.
yeah. And I love that you guys have the two model approach as well because, like, to your point, if somebody doesn't have the capital, but they know it's a good thing to do from an amenities perspective, they can go the subscription route. And it's the same model for us in California with solar from the standpoint of being able to help people save money, zero upfront cost.
Mhm.
When you look at it, there's really no reason why somebody wouldn't do it. So for you guys, is one of the bigger bottlenecks because you have the two options and one's going to fit every person that comes or every company that comes from the standpoint of being interested. But would you say a big bottleneck is actual infrastructure, like physical property limitations? Or is it because
I
again, it's not
I
money and it's
say
not
it's not that. Once the property has acknowledged and understands that, okay, we have a need. So a lot of times they'll survey their residents. They'll just send a survey out. And even if the residents decide, yeah, I don't have an EV, but I think this would be a really great thing for our community because I've been thinking about getting one, but this will motivate me to get one even more. I think the bottleneck happens in our industry is, especially if you're working with a bunch of different ownerships, maybe there's one property, but there's two different ownership groups. We have a lot of different roles within the multifamily industry. And sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I'm just going to shoot it
Mm,
straight, right? Like you start at one level and then you kind of got to know this person, but you might need to know construction. And I'm not speaking of that necessarily from a selling perspective. I'm talking about making sure I've got everybody's questions answered. So the
mhm,
bottleneck, to answer your question, it can happen when maybe I didn't have the right conversation and somebody else has tried to explain all the things we're talking about today with the differences of our model, and someone's left scratching their head, but I don't know who that person is. So
yeah,
that's more where the bottleneck comes for us versus, and again, that goes back to our focus on marketing for 2026. Because if I know a certain company and I recognize a certain company, I don't necessarily need to understand all the intricacies. I've had a good experience with them before. I know clients that they're using or that they've already worked with. The reputation almost precedes itself. So that's another reason why we're focused on in 2026, because I do think that on the marketing piece, because I think that will also help cut down on some of the bottleneck because people will begin to say, oh yeah, that EV passport, we recognize them. We've seen their brand, we've know their jobs, and you know, Bob's using them or John's using them, or whoever the clients are. They do ownership groups and property management companies. They have those internal and external conversations when we attend conferences, and we have a lot of conferences that we attend within our industry where a lot of that chatter happens, and that's a lot of the grassroots, but it also happens with a strong branding and marketing plan.
that's awesome. And you said you guys are focusing more heavily on the marketing in 2026. Up until now, have you been leveraging your network and your experience in the multifamily space, or how have you guys been scaling from the standpoint of new opportunity?
Yeah, it has been very driven by relationships, folks that we know that we have been that, and I'm just going to speak for myself, but we have a team of 5, 7, our SVP and RVPs, but we have a lot of long-standing relationships. I'm not the only one who has been in the multifamily space for quite some time. Our entire team has that I work with. And, that goes back to being a consultant for our clients in the prior roles where we've been. So they know that, maybe you didn't choose me this time, but you choose me next time on a different project. So it's trust issue, or a trust concern rather that folks want to have. To answer your question, it comes back to more being generated by who do I know? How can I share this? Who do they know that I can meet with and share it with that person too? We did implement an internal BDR team to help generate some of those leads as well and get that conversation going with some of, the smaller companies, more regionally located, maybe less than 50 assets, things like that. The more conversations, the more departments like our BDR that we have out there, the more familiar our clients and they're going to start to, and they already have, to start to recognize our name. They're seeing us now at trade shows. Our first NAA, which is our National Apartment Association that we attended, was last year. So, that's another big step in that, okay, we have now gotten the momentum because NAA is kind of like your coming out party, right? This is the part where you're now being like, okay, I'm in the room with the big boys. And this is where people are really here to listen and learn about what it is that we do as an organization. So that us attending was a really great accomplishment for us to be able to see our clients last year.
So good. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So talk to me a little bit about like the sales process in general, right? So let's say you helped John Smith in their apartment complex and he has a lead for you, right? And the lead comes in and this is the first time you're talking to them. Can you explain your process from an initial sales call to a site visit to the engineering side of it and then the implementation and even the time frame? What is the time frame like?
That's such a big question because there's
I
so
know,
many
I'm sorry.
pieces to it. No, so
I
um,
got a little excited.
just we'll go with the most simplistic one first, and that is I have chargers and they're broken, and I need somebody to fix it. And, we'll just use that example that you mentioned. I've worked with someone before, and they've given me a referral. I will reach out, share the deck, talk through how we can come in, take out those existing chargers and replace them. And usually, if they're broken, they're probably not generating any income for that property either for
Right.
a whole host of reasons. Maybe it's a software issue, maybe it's a maintenance issue, whatever it is. But we can come in and replace those units usually within 4 to 6 weeks from the time that the client has said, yes, I want to work with you. Yes, I want you to manage it. I'm in for the subscription, or even if they decide they want to do the capital upfront, they can do that too. So once that happens, I move everything over to our deployment team. Our deployment team instantly gets in touch with our installers. We bid that out to make sure that they can cover that area, that time frame. Even if it's something to where they've got 2, but maybe they wanna add 2 more so that we can take that into the full scope of the work. So once the installer has done a site visit, which usually takes us about 7 to 10 days on that, for the installer to have that report, generate that information back to me, for me to be able to then share a proposal with the client. All in all, that's about 15 to 25 business days, depending upon the location, depending upon the scope of the work. So that's why I said there's a big answer to that. And it
Yeah.
works just the same if it's tenant improvement as that process I just described to you. Our main holdup, if it is a tenant improvement, is not something internally. It's typically what the permitting time frame is or the turnaround time for a permit. So some counties they're out 6 months. So
Yeah.
that's why it's important to know if you need these for spring lease up, which is the biggest lease up every year is the spring lease up. They want to get moved just after school and into the summer before they have to start typically a new school year or a new place towards, they want it to kind of be during that summer time frame. That's why it's always such a big time. So if you know that you want your chargers to be installed by April, we need to know as soon as possible because it could be 6 months before we could even get a permit to start the work for that particular area, wherever it may be located.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, so you guys are ramping up. Thank you for that breakdown. I know that was like a 4 level question.
Yeah, well, I
That
hope
was really
I
good.
tried to, like, tighten it up for you, so I
You
hope I
did. You
did a good
helped.
job of making it concise for you because it
No,
really
it's really good.
very similar process if we are just replacing what you got that's broken, or want to have something that's a revenue generator. It's just a longer process when it's tenant improvement. You know, if it's a scope of work where we're digging through concrete, we're boring through garages, we got 150 feet of conduit. Those are all things that will take longer and make that process longer. But again, we still handle all of those things internally. So the property teams, internal construction teams aren't worried about the things that I just named. They just know EV passports taking care of that.
Yeah, which is so nice.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about I know you said 2026, you guys are doing a lot of, like, you're ramping up marketing. You said a big platform that you guys are gonna market through is gonna be LinkedIn, correct?
That's part of it. There's a lot of other different articles and, you know, my marketing department, I don't might have minored in marketing when I went to school, but it's a major that I choose. I
Yeah.
don't know exactly what our marketing plan is, but I will tell you we've gained a lot of traction within LinkedIn. It's something that I know I personally focus in for my personal brand as well. I talk a lot about EV charging as it relates to not just multifamily, but just the growth over the last couple of years that we've seen. And I use it as a branding slash tool so people know what EV Passport is or who EV Passport is, in addition to being a resource for just providing knowledge there. And I know that's one of our focus points, but there's a lot of different avenues that our marketing team is using that are within not just multifamily verticals, because as I mentioned earlier, we have casinos, we partner with different hotel groups and things like that. So all of those different verticals have their own ways to market within those different verticals. So I can just kind of speak to the one for multifamily.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then from the standpoint of future growth, other than the marketing side, I mean, do you guys as a team collectively is the growth trajectory over 12 to 24 months, are these targets? Is it more like number of clients? Is it percentage growth? Is it dollar figures in revenue growth? Like, how are you guys kind of projecting your goals and what you guys want to achieve?
Yeah, so it is all of those things, right? It's absolutely revenue growth driven. Year over year growth, I would say, is probably one of our heaviest focuses. You know, where January we had one of our largest months that we've ever had. It was the largest month, not one of our. It was the largest month that we've ever had. So you know, we're kicking off 2026 strong, and I would
Wow.
say year over year growth, in addition to market share. You know, market share is something that it then expands into brand recognition, where that also creates additional opportunities for doors to open up. So, I would say that the 2 most are year-over-year growth and our market share.
Perfect. And
Mhm.
then the model, are there a lot of competitors in the space on the subscription model base where it's zero down for the client? Because I didn't know that that was possible.
No, there are not. I will say I believe if those companies are still out there and they are offering that, there's a lot of caveats to that. You know, it has to be the right property type or it has to be in the right area. There's not a stamp of if you are looking for this model, it doesn't matter to us what model or what state you're in, what city you're in, what zip code, what metro, what's your property type, what year were you built. None of those things matter for us because we have that large firm that's behind us with our industrial capital firm. And, you know, that makes it more palatable for ownership groups to add that infrastructure that they have been knowing that they probably needed for the
Yeah.
last 3 or 4 years, but didn't want to build in that capex for it. Even if they aren't a long, if it's not a long term hold asset, let's just say it's a 5 year hold asset or a 7 year hold, it's still worth it in that time to generate the revenue and have that amenity so that you can garner more leases because you have that amenity.
So good.
Mhm.
You know, on this podcast, I interview a lot of developers and a lot of big property management firms. So I would love to try to connect you guys and just help you guys grow your business. So I'll definitely
Yeah.
keep you in mind.
Yeah, that sounds great. You know, I love to do different podcasts. It's always such a great just to connect with you. And you know, you and I have had a lot of different conversations about what your business is, and um, you know, really just kind of sharing again what is how the market has changed. You know, how it is not the EV world today is not where we were sitting 2 years ago, 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago. So it's been a quick moving thing, not as fast as AI these days, but it has
Yeah.
been because it's slower because infrastructure takes time and there is a lot that needs to happen in different cities to adopt for that infrastructure. So that's certainly something that we can help and help the properties plan for.
Absolutely. All right. Well, listen, if somebody wants to get a hold of you directly or learn more about what you guys do as a business, what's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
You know what? I'm just gonna no, I'm not. I've started to give up my phone
I was
number.
gonna say, put your
Not.
cell phone out
I'm
there.
not. I'm not gonna do it because I would so much rather get a phone call. I'm an old-fashioned kinda girl. I get so many emails. I love it when a client picks up the phone, and I did that with a client earlier this morning. I just had, like, a 2-minute question for this client, and it turned into a 25-minute great powwow, connect, catch up. We were, brainstorming on some stuff. So I love a phone call, but my email is D and also, my name is Dana Guandolo. I'm the only Dana Guandolo in the country, so I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And so it would be my email, dguandolo, Guandolo, at evpassport.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Dana, thank you so much for being on with us. That was
Yeah,
a
of
really
course.
fun episode.
I enjoyed it. Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. It was lots of fun. I love doing podcasts. They're great. Lots
Absolutely. Well, let's definitely keep in touch, and then I'd love to have you guys on, and kind of come full circle and check in with you guys.
I would love that. That would be great.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank
Take
you
care,
again.
Ryan. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Awesome.